SABC finally has a new board. It comes 6 months after the end of the term of the last board, and the president has defended the delay in the appointment of that board. And of course, one of the sticking points is that the process had followed a unanimous decision by members of parliament to recommend members to that board. So will they be given a free hand without interference in an election season? We also want to talk about the South African Post Office. To explain all of that is the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, Mondli Gungubele, who has graciously agreed to speak to us this morning. Minister, thank you for your time. It's been a moment. Welcome back to our program.
Good morning, Bongani. Good morning to your listenership. Thanks for the time.
Let's start with the SABC. There's been much criticism leveled against the delay in appointing this board, and concerns will, of course, no doubt be looking at what happens next year when we might go to the polls. The president has defended this decision, but was this delay really necessary?
Well, once the parliament takes a decision, Bongani, and they submit to the president, it is submitting to the president, who is, for a number of reasons, in his position, a guardian of the law, to ensure that he is actually convinced that it is within the legal prescripts. And, the president would have raised a number of questions, which court finally sorted. Now the board has been approved, and we are very much happy. Happy in the sense that issues of revenue plans, business plans, clients and advertisers will actually find themselves in a position of being ascertained, and that sort of going forward will help protect the going concern of the institution.
One of the concerns, of course, around the governing party and the relationship with the SABC is the concern around editorial or even political interference. And I'll tell you why I raised that point. As I said in my introduction, we know the nominations process followed a unanimous list by the members of the committee that they recommended to the president. There was, of course, as you well know, 3 additional nominees to that final 12. They were a reserve pool. We know that there's been a scathing legal opinion by the state attorney saying the president should really have never been confused. And yet there was an objection from Minister Nchaveni about the former head of news, Patiso Mahopeni, who was, of course, included in that list. And that's what will raise the concern about possible political interference.
Well, I've said to you, Bongani, the president raised questions which he asked for clarity around to the parliament, and parliament responded. And of course, parliament would have sought a legal opinion, which gave a feedback to them. The most exciting thing now, where I'm sitting as the Minister of Communication, is that SABC is going to actually get back on track in a more solid way. Let me say this. I'm happy that you repeated it. The unanimity, which is always a sought-after thing whenever there's an appointment of this nature. It's always ideal that there should be unanimity. There are certain appointments that you always pray, you wish there could be unanimity because of the public nature those appointments are. And unanimity, therefore, in Parliament should be commended. And the fact that the president has signed. And I want to say, the laws within which the public broadcaster is supposed to work will be observed. And I have no fear with regard to that mandate will be served in terms of the law.
We know the public broadcaster has faced some difficult headwinds in recent times, losses in the millions of rands. This situation, I suppose you might argue, is steadily improving, but we're nowhere near the SABC breaking even from the numbers that have been reported.
Listen, the period it took to appoint the SABC board is a period we should avoid going forward because of a number of issues that I've already stated to you. The confidence and the settings of clients and advertisers. And then remember the revenue generation of SABC. There's a huge percentage dependent on the commercial amenability. And then the issues of ensuring that it is financially stable. A lot of decisions that are of governance imperatives depend on the board being present. And I think a lot has been said. I hope we go forward with minimum damage.
Minister, whilst I have you, let's talk about the South African Post Office, which, as you know, last turned a profit in 2004. Creditors have now come calling and it's under provisional liquidation. You intend to fight this? Why?
Listen, we are weighing options, Bongan. It's a stressful situation that an institution like this, which serves mainly the poor, who are in the hinterland, who are in the actually outskirts, disadvantaged people, that is in the situation where it is. We are weighing options. We are working with all the relevant parties. We are trying to include as many relevant parties to find a solution that will sustain SAPO, because saving SAPO, it is in the public interest. So we know there, we speak of creditors' interests, we talk of the public interest. We are doing everything to check if we cannot reconcile those.
Minister, I know you're new to this portfolio, so just for clarity's sake, I'm not pointing these to you specifically in terms of your person, but ultimately, when one looks at the track record of the South African Post Office, creditors who are owed at least, 4.4 billion rand that we know it's not going to be able to repay, 20 years, as I said, since it was last profitable, and you talk about it being in the public interest, those crucial services it provides, including distributing social grants, all of this has happened under the watch of this government. It's really been the poor stewardship of various administrations under this government. We've known about this all along.
I must say, I'm heartened by your intention not to deal with me personally. But I'm a successor in title. I'm part of this government. If there are challenges of its weakness, I'm part of that. I think, Bongani, having gone through the short time I've just done a preliminary survey, there's no doubt everyone, even if it's a predecessor, we all agree that we could have done better.
When Mark Barnes proposed to buy the South African Post Office, critics will argue it was government hubris that turned him down, and one suspects even he wouldn't touch it now.
I'm going through the era of Mark Barnes. I'm trying to avoid Bongani because of the nature. When you talk about provisional liquidation, there's a lot of sensitive interest involved. There's a lot of business interest involved. So you try to work as careful as you can. How wholly Mark Barnes has been in this process. One day, when all the facts are put on the table, public will be clarified. I listen to it. I read newspapers even before I came here. But when you come in this space, there's a lot of stories that need to be told, but because we are moving we're at a phase that is very sensitive. We want to handle this matter in a commercially advisable way. I'm not the one who avoids answering questions, but the circumstances under which the post office is calls for a delicate way on how we engage in public about a number of issues.
But Minister, with respect, I mean, we've already seen a turnaround strategy retrenching, 6,000 jobs. We've seen branches closed. We've seen salaries cut. And even with a 2.4 billion rand bailout, the situation has not been turned around. The turnaround plan to digitize and modernize and even diversify to e-commerce hasn't worked because the post office can barely deliver mail. I mean, how much more browbeaten do you have to be before you admit defeat?
The 2.5 billion you're speaking about, Bonani. I think what is the date today? Is it 19 or 20 of April?
19th?
Yes, thank you very much. This is the first month of the financial year where you will start accessing the 2.5 or 2.4, what they call billion. But the plan, which has been adopted by the president, by the cabinet, is quite a brilliant plan of the office of tomorrow. But the challenge we have, it is starting on the basis of the legacy of the past, which needs to be dealt with so that the plan takes off in a useful way. The plan remains very brilliant. And I've gone through the plan.
How is it brilliant? I'm sorry, Minister. I'm sorry. How is it brilliant? We have spent billions bailing this entity out. I've spoken to the CEO of the South African Post Office who promised the same brilliance you are alluding to, and yet the results speak for themselves. This is an entity that even can't pay rent.
Listen, Bonan, I hope, let me repeat this. I'm saying to you the 2.5 billion. 2.4 billion, which is supposed to support the new plan, can only start in April. I'm not sure if that makes sense. It can only start in April. So going forward, from April onward, then we need to begin to check how the plan is performing. Remember that plan depended on the budget, which the minister pronounced in February, and whose official release is only supposed to take place this month. Then that plan can only be funded now. So I thought I'm trying to clarify something.
I understood that, Minister, the first time. I guess my point is that we've had bailouts before. We've had similar sums thrown at the post office, no doubt, with promises of brilliance and turning things around, and yet we haven't seen that. And even with this money coming in, it doesn't cover even really half of what this entity still owes. But we'll keep an eye on it. We'll watch and see. We've run out of time with you this morning, but we appreciate you coming on. Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, Mondli Gungubele, there says the plan is brilliant, just needed that extra funding, which is now going to be released. Watch this space. The post office is going to fly once more. Do you believe it?
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions.
Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.